3 days ago, I sat in the sterile, air-conditioned courtroom and watched my ex-husband, Mark, flash his dazzling, empty smile at the judge. It was our daughter Lily's 7th birthday, and Mark was trying to take her away from me. He was trying to use his money, his tailored suits, and his highly paid lawyer to paint me as an unstable, financially inept mother. He spoke about Lily's future, about his stable new life, and about how I simply couldn't provide the level of opportunity she deserved. I should have known that day, watching the venomous confidence in his eyes, that a man like Mark doesn't stop destroying things just because a judge signed a piece of paper. The truth was, my entire world was built on the shaky foundation of his lies. And what I did next, what I uncovered during those soul-destroying divorce proceedings, didn't just save my daughter. It changed everything. The setup had been perfect, the kind of domestic peace that makes the inevitable rupture feel even more jarring. For years I had been the silent partner, the one who handled the house and the school runs, while Mark built his consulting firm, a company that specialized in global asset management. Our house, all glass and polished wood on the outskirts of the city, smelled permanently of expensive furniture and the faint, metallic scent of Mark's cologne. It wasn't a home, it was a luxury cage. The emotional abuse was insidious. It wasn't slaps or shouts, but a slow, calculated erosion of my confidence. Every dollar I spent was scrutinized. Every friendship I kept was questioned. Every decision I made was stupid or not fiscally sound. He was the sun, and I was the satellite, orbiting his brilliance and shrinking from his heat. Lily was the only source of warmth I had left.
The first true shock came about a year after I finally found the courage to ask for a divorce. I'd seen a number on a bank statement, a transfer of $300,000 to an offshore account labeled only as V. Project. When I asked him about it, his face didn't move. He simply stared at me, his eyes cold and flat. It's company business, Sarah. Nothing you need to worry your pretty little head about. Just sign the confidentiality agreement and move on. It wasn't the money that terrified me. It was the complete lack of humanity. The way he dismissed my existence. I knew then I wasn't just divorcing an unhappy husband. I was divorcing a moral void. The custody battle was Mark's final, cruel masterpiece. He knew taking Lily was the only way to truly break me. His lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Eleanor, presented a meticulous case.
She detailed my employment history, the part-time work, the career gaps pitting my modest income against Mark's self-reported net worth of $27 million. Mr. Thompson offers Lily a trust fund, private tutors, and a truly global upbringing. Eleanor had purred to the judge. Mrs. Thompson offers respectfully instability and a cramped apartment near a noisy train line. I felt the shame rising in my throat. Mark sat there, head inclined, the picture of a concerned, wronged father. I was working with a good but small legal aid attorney named Ms. Davies. She was a pit bull, but she was outgunned. "We need something on him, Sarah," she told me during a brief recess, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "Something real, beyond the emotional history. Financial impropriety, something that shows moral turpitude."
My hands were shaking as I held the single piece of evidence I still had. That old bank statement showing the $300,000 transfer to V Project. It had been shoved into an old photo album, forgotten until I started packing boxes. I suddenly remembered Mark's routine. Every Friday he worked late, claiming to finalize international contracts. He was meticulous, always locking his briefcase. But one night, a detail flashed in my memory. A small, silver thumb drive, always attached to his keyring, that he frequently plugged into his work laptop. The escalation was terrifyingly subtle. I didn't just break into his office. That would have been too risky. Instead, I started talking. I started calling old employees of Mark's, people who had left his firm mysteriously or on bad terms. They were all afraid to speak, their voices hushed, their answers vague.
They all mentioned the same thing, the fear of his fixers. One former financial analyst, a young man named Ben, finally agreed to meet me in a crowded coffee shop at 7:30 in the evening. He looked over his shoulder every 5 minutes. "Mark isn't just a consultant, Sarah," Ben whispered, stirring his coffee until the cream dissolved completely. "He's a conduit. He moves large, untraceable sums of money for people who don't want the paperwork. Dirty money. Real estate, gold, commodities, it's all global asset management on the surface. Ben told me about the thumb drive. It didn't contain client files. It contained a secure encrypted spreadsheet. He called it the ledger. He said Mark kept it separate because it had the real names, the real accounts, and the real nature of the transactions, the illegal ones. The stakes were now astronomical.
I wasn't just fighting for child support. I was fighting an internationally connected criminal operation. If Mark knew I was looking for the ledger, my life and Lily's would be in danger. I knew the layout of his office like the back of my hand. I knew the security system password Lily's birthday, month and year, because he had no imagination. I drove there on a Tuesday night, not a Friday, because he was out of town at a conference in Geneva. The air in the office was thick and cold. I found his spare keyring tucked away in a tiny locked safe. I knew the combination too, and there it was, the small, metallic silver drive. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I raced back to my apartment, my hands slick on the steering wheel. Ms. Davies had instructed me to make a copy immediately and hand the original to her. Plugging the drive into my old laptop, I waited for the password prompt. It wasn't the usual complicated corporate string. I typed in one word, the only word Mark had ever said with true possessive feeling. Mine. The file opened. What appeared on the screen wasn't just a ledger, it was a digital map of corruption. Transfers of millions of dollars routed through dummy corporations in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, and Switzerland. Project I had seen was the codename for a major arms dealer being investigated by 5 different European agencies. I saw names of politicians, shell companies, and the staggering total. Over $80 million moved in the last 3 years alone. Then she said it. The 7 words that turned my stomach to ice.
One transaction was for a payment made to a private detective agency just last month, with the memo field reading, "Custody, fabricate drug use evidence on Sarah." He wasn't just using his money to win. He was paying people to lie, to plant evidence, to frame me as a drug user and permanently ruin my life and take Lily away forever. The climax arrived not in a shout, but in a dull bureaucratic hum of the courtroom 4 days later. The custody hearing had resumed. Mark was on the stand, radiating practiced sincerity, testifying about my erratic behavior and my unsuitable environment for Lily. Ms. Davies approached the podium, a large manila envelope clutched in her hands. She didn't look at Mark. She looked only at the judge. "Your Honor, we are prepared to submit newly discovered evidence regarding Mr. Thompson's true financial background and his moral suitability as a parent."
Mark's face, for the first time in 10 years, crumpled. It was only a fraction of a second, but I saw the mask slip, revealing the true terror underneath. He knew. Ms. Specta P.S. Davies projected the first page of the ledger onto the courtroom screen. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Thompson, this is a big town." Davies' voice was steel. "Can you confirm the existence of a shell corporation registered in Panama under the name Apex Capital Ventures?" "Objection." "Relevance," Eleanor screamed, jumping to her feet. "Sustained," the judge said, but his eyes were fixed on the screen. Ms. Davies didn't relent. "Then let us move to relevance, Your Honor. This document shows $800,000 routed from that company to an account belonging to a man named Victor Demetrio."
This man, as documented by this printout from Interpol, she held up another page, is currently under global indictment for arms trafficking. The courtroom gasped. Mark's perfect, tailored shoulders slumped. The lie was exposed. Ms. Davies then delivered the final, devastating blow. "And finally, Your Honor, we present this, a bank transfer showing a payment of $25,000 to an operative of private investigator agency, with the direct memo, custody, fabricate drug use evidence on Sarah Thompson. This is evidence of a premeditated, criminal attempt to subvert the court and fraudulently remove a child from her mother." The aftershock was deafening. The judge didn't even need to recess.
He immediately suspended the custody proceedings and called the U.S. Attorney's Office, who were already interested in Mark's global asset management. Mark was escorted out of the courtroom not by his lawyer, but by federal agents, his hands cuffed behind his back. Eleanor looked sick, packing her files in panicked silence. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a weary, profound relief. It wasn't about winning. It was about survival. Mark thought he could destroy my life with a lie about a cramped apartment. He thought he could steal my daughter with a staged document about my instability. But his own greed, His need to control every single financial thread in his life became the weapon I used to take him down. The financial recovery was long and painful. I cooperated fully with the federal investigators, turning over all of Mark's digital records.
The divorce was finalized quickly after that, the custody awarded fully to me. I received a small settlement, nowhere near the millions he claimed to be worth, but enough to move us into a small, quiet neighborhood. The apartment was still small, but it smelled of fresh paint, Lily's crayons, and my own honest effort. The last I heard, Mark was facing multiple counts of money laundering and obstruction of justice. He thought he could use the court to ruin me. Instead, I used his own divorce as the legal lens to uncover his global corruption. Lily had her 8th birthday a few weeks ago. It was a small party, just 3 friends, with a homemade cake that smelled like cinnamon and love. Watching her blow out the candles, her face flushed with pure, unburdened happiness, I knew my life was finally mine. Some people break families for profit. Others rebuild them from the ashes of truth.
And I was finally free.